Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at theDove.us. All right, welcome back, and as always, a delight to have back in the studio with us Bob Just, and Bob's been around Southern Oregon. Well, he's just an old dog.
A long time.
He's an old dog, and he writes for WorldNet Daily. You see some of his articles. He has bobjust.com, and lately he's been MIA, but we found him. We rescued him. We got him back. He was missing in action in New York City, of all places.
New York City.
Good to see you, Bob. Thanks for coming in yesterday and today.
Happy 5 years.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful adventure.
Quite a ride. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave what I would say is a historic speech. I think it will go down in world history. So many things from that speech. I think we saw somebody for the first time in 6 years act presidential. It was said that isn't it a sad day when you have to have a foreigner come to our joint session of Congress and act like an American.
One Fox News commentator said she had leadership envy.
Yeah.
We wish our leader was like Netanyahu.
This is what statesmanship looks like. This is what a head of state looks like.
Right.
This is what presidential looks like. I was, now look, I was stunned after the speech, and we'll get into bits and pieces of the speech, but I was stunned at some of the comments after the speech. Some people actually called him childish, a crybaby, go home. And you saw some of the lists, and these are people that were not only on the floor, some others who weren't there and still said it, and went right to the cameras after and heavily criticized him. So there's a lot to talk about. Overall, I have one question for you.
Okay, fire away.
One question. What is it about this administration that wants and allows Iran to have anything nuclear?
You know, what you're going right to is the heart of this, and that is appeasement. And appeasement is kind of a mystery. It really is. You know, Dennis Prager wrote a column, wonderful thinker, Dennis Prager, and he wrote a conservative Jew, very pro-Israel, of course, and he wrote a column and said, you know, there's always going to be enmity between the people who will stand up and face down evil and the people who won't. And the interesting thing is the people who won't stand up and face down evil have enmity toward the people who will. So
that is spiritual.
It is spiritual. And do you know something? I'll tell you.
Trying to politicize a spiritual phenomenon.
I believe that appeasement is a spiritual thing. And you know something people don't know, and I only learned recently myself, the famous example of appeasement in recent history is Neville Chamberlain and Hitler.
Right.
And of course, Winston Churchill famously in the 1930s was castigated and attacked because he was standing up and saying, these people are dangerous, we have to stand up to them. And he was really persecuted. The thing I didn't know is that Chamberlain and the others who were persecuting Churchill were in his own party.
Right.
They were in his own party. And they ostracized him. They tried to destroy his career. Not only did they try to remove him as a political leader from office, but they tried to undermine his ability to make a living through writing. They literally tried to destroy him.
Wow.
This is the spiritual fight.
But the bottom line to this, Bob, is Iran has a 36-year history of terrorism and supporting those who carry out terrorism, no matter where it is around the world. They have basically thumbed their nose at us on anything that comes to legitimate negotiations as it relates to a nuclear program. I think one thing that the Prime Minister did yesterday was point out the fallacies of the proposal that's currently on the table, and that was his job.
Right.
But I go back to the central question. What is it about Barack Obama that he would even allow Iran, with that kind of a history, to have anything nuclear? What is it?
Well, see, it's natural for people like you and me and most of the folks listening, obviously, this morning and watching TV, to think rationally. We're looking at it and we're saying, well, Iran lies to us. Iran is the primary fomenter of terrorism around the world. They are a source of real evil, and they were part of the axis of evil that George Bush called out, and they lie to us. What is it about them that we think we can make a deal with?
Yeah.
And it goes back to the spiritual dimension. I'll never forget when my father taught me the word rationalization. I remember where I was sitting, the dining room table, because I understood the core principle of it. People use their rational mind in order to create constructs that help them to avoid God's truth. So they're rationalizing what they want to do. I shouldn't eat that ice cream. I've said I wouldn't, and I'm overweight, and I want a diet, and But then they say, well, I worked hard. It's hot. Their mind starts to create reasons to do what they know they shouldn't do. Now that's a tiny little example, but the same methodology works for bigger examples. So Obama's rationalized how not to take action. Netanyahu is an entirely different person. He is more God-connected. He sees the reality. He uses his rational mind to make a fair analysis, and that leads to action.
Yeah. Boy, that's well said, because what we have here now is our relationship. Think about what the Prime Minister did yesterday. He got up, he recognized the President, he recognized the fact that he was in a contentious setting. This is not political. I'm doing my job as the leader of my country and my people to protect it.
Right, and he honored him.
And he honored the President, he honored Harry Reid, he honored John Kerry, and then he gave his reason for being there.
Right.
What was in the speech, from your perspective, that would have ignited the administration to say nothing new, we don't need this, and to have the incredible, almost visceral reaction that it did to the Democrats?
Well, again, you're hitting on what I think is a core question for not just this issue, but for what's happening in the country. We have a political party that, and I've written about this for 15 years. We have a political party in this country that is no longer in any historical sense an American party. It serves itself. It's a one-party, the Democratic Party, and it's my party, as you know, and I remain a Democrat so I can criticize my party from within with articles like My Un-American Democratic Party or Fascism, Corruption in My Democratic Party. That party no longer serves America. They serve their own ideological interests, typical of the hard left. So they don't operate by the same calculus that you and I do, or that conservatives do, or most Republicans do. They're simply looking at a power question. Is it good for the party? Is it good for Obama? Is it good for this administration to support Netanyahu, or does it run against our power? And they made a decision that it runs against our power, so they don't care about the seriousness of the issue, the credibility of Netanyahu, the reasonable points he's making. They don't care. That's a scary reality.
It's very scary, and it's content for lots of shows. But let's come back to the Prime Minister yesterday.
Yeah.
It gets down to this. Why did he come? He came because there is a proposal on the table from the United States to Iran that is very dangerous. And he said, currently the talks with Iran offer a very bad deal. Take a look.
The greatest danger facing our world is the marriage of militant Islam with nuclear weapons. To defeat ISIS and let Iran get nuclear weapons would be to win the battle but lose the war. We can't let that happen.
But the deal does let that happen, because it basically says, all right, well, yeah, let's agree now not to really do anything big, but in 10 years all this comes off the table. And there's another addendum to the deal. Iran, not the United States, but Iran could pull out anytime they want to pull out.
Right.
What kind of a deal is this?
It's a fraud. And I have to say, so much of what the Obama administration has done is a fraud. It connects to him saying, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. They just don't mind lying, because the leftist rationalization is that they are so right in what they believe and so determined that what they believe is true that they will do anything to enthrone it. And that includes lying. The analogy, by the way, the analogy even going way back in my childhood, my youth, the analogy the left uses is, well, if the Nazis came to your door and you were hiding a Jew in the attic, you would lie to the Nazis, wouldn't you? And of course, common sense people say, yeah, you would. Well, they take that and drive a truck through it. They apply that to everything because we're so bad and they're so good.
So what basically we're saying is, all right, we're going to take the 30-06 out of your hand, but we're going to let you have a 22.
Yeah, which, right, you can kill someone with.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, again, as I say, the difficulty for us is we think rationally. Netanyahu made it very clear that if they make the deal, that first of all, Iran has never proven that it's going to be faithful to a deal, okay? And the second thing is the deal sunsets in 10 years. So, as Netanyahu said, this isn't a block to a nuclear Iran. This is a path to a nuclear Iran. And conservatives see that, reasonable people see that, certainly Christians see that. But the left, the appeasers, the ones that feel that war is never the answer, or whatever rationalization they have, we can always come to the table, whether it's with Hitler or with Khomeini or whatever, they won't see it. They won't see it.
Okay. And I think that that's something we have to understand here, because as much as the left is pronounced in their tenacity to see it their way, the people that they're negotiating with have the same equal tenacity to see it their way. So you got two groups who lie to bring about their means. So how can you trust either one of them to make a deal that would be solid for those of us who think rational?
Right. And that's why I said yesterday that I'm hoping the presidential candidates will weigh into this. I was glad to see that Dr. Ben Carson announced a exploratory committee yesterday on Bill O'Reilly's show on Fox News. The candidates, the presidential candidates, have some leverage. Because when they're running for president, there is a possibility, sometimes reasonable, sometimes a long shot, but there's a possibility they'll be president. And if they weigh in and say, and question what's happening and saying, I'm not going to agree to anything Obama agrees to if the Congress has not signed off on it, the Senate specifically, with all the information on the table, has not ratified this, I will not abide by it because this is a bad deal. And just made that statement. Of course, it would cause a firestorm.
Well, the whole purpose of the Prime Minister being there yesterday was to basically derail the proposal that's on the table. Two quick questions before we take a break. Do you think he succeeded?
Ooh, I hope so. That's not the. You're going to have to see how it unfolds in the next few weeks. I think it certainly has gotten the Obama administration kind of back on its heels.
40 times he was interrupted with applause. He had the crowd, even bipartisan for a while, even though they stood and they went out and criticized him. But to watch that event, he had the crowd.
And it's now on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's not only in full-length speech, but in segments.
Yeah.
Like the Dove covered it yesterday, and it's on the Dove website, and it will stay on the Dove website. People will start accessing it. It's going to have an influence.
One other quick question. I got to take a break. Was he a prophet yesterday to the world?
I believe he absolutely was. You and I have talked to him in that context, talked about him in that context for some years because of previous speeches of his, particularly his last speech a few years ago. Yeah. Yes, I think what he has done and why he had to speak to Congress is he had a moment in time to draw a line historically and say, this is where we are. And if we continue going in this direction, there will be war. And he did say that. There will be war. And Israel will stand alone if it has to.
That's what I want you to comment on. He did say Israel will stand alone, but he chooses to have Israel stand with the United States. I want you to comment on that. We'll be right back with Bob Just. Welcome back. We're back with Bob Just. We're kind of highlighting yesterday's incredible, I believe, historic speech, if not prophetic speech to the world yesterday by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before a joint session of Congress. Have you seen any polling, Bob?
Yeah, the interesting one that jumped out to me, Perry, was the Rasmussen poll.
Yeah.
And this goes to your question before the break about what kind of impact is this going to have. Yeah. Well, how many people thought it was important that their congressman go to that speech, and how many people didn't think it was important? 65% thought it was somewhat or very important that their Congress show up. 65%. Okay. Only 26% said it was not important.
All right, so that's landslide.
That's landslide, yeah. And that means that those people are checking out the speech, checking out the YouTube, whether young or old. I'm sure people are checking out and I'm hoping those speeches segmented so people can get
they're all over the place.
Nuggets of it, not just the whole speech.
Yesterday it was all over the place, and I really felt that, again, we saw what presidential looks like. We saw what statesmanship looked like.
Right.
He was a head of state. This is what you do. It was an incredible time, and people are saying now he is the leader of the free world. We've subordinated our position in that.
That's a beautiful comment, and you know, it's interesting when you say it's what presidential looks like. It harkens back to George W. Bush. You know, he, in his second inaugural address, which William Safire, who was a speechwriter, a columnist at the time for New York Times, and has written books on speeches, said was one of the top 5 speeches, second inaugural addresses in American history. And I'll give you a quote from it, and it'll remind you of what presidential looks like. This is from the inaugural address into the beginning of 2005. And President Bush: "Today, America speaks anew to the peoples of the world. All who live in tyranny and hopelessness can know the United States will not ignore your oppression or excuse your oppressors. When you stand for liberty, we will stand with you."
Wow. Now, take that.
It's 10 years ago.
And overlay some of the highlights that you had yesterday from Prime Minister Netanyahu, because I think it's incumbent upon Christians to watch this speech from another lens, through another lens, and that is, look for the things that resonate with your faith, because he was speaking to evangelicals.
Yes. Yes.
Give some of those highlights.
He was.
Yeah.
Well, he, and one of the, well, first of all, you remember how he began the speech. "Greetings from Jerusalem, our eternal, undivided capital." Eternal. That's speaking right to Christians, evangelical Christians especially.
Okay.
He talked about defending our common civilization against common threats. Common civilization, Judeo-Christian America. And he knows, and by the way, famous Israelis like Natan Sharansky have written about this. Netanyahu knows that Europe has gone secular.
Right.
Europe is the secular world.
Right.
America still shines the light. It's still what, you know, the shining city on the hill that Reagan talked about, and of course goes back to Winthrop. Netanyahu knows that. So when he says the days where the Jewish people are passive before enemies who wish to annihilate us, those days are over. And he knows how Americans feel about that, because that's talking about standing for not just survival, but standing for liberty. He also says America and Israel are more than allies. We're like family, mishpucha, which is a Yiddish word meaning family, a close family. We have disagreements, but we must always remember we are family. Again, why? Judeo-Christian Western culture. That's what Israel stands for. That's what America stands for.
All right. Now, along that, he said the current sanctions should be lifted only if Iran stops exhibiting bad behavior and not before. He said that the United States and Israel need to stand together to fight what's described as Iran's terror. Take a listen.
This deal won't change Iran for the better. It will only change the Middle East for the worse. A deal that's supposed to prevent nuclear proliferation would instead spark a nuclear arms race in the most dangerous part of the planet.
All right.
Well, let me point out a couple things there. One is, he carefully said that the information that he's sharing could be Googled.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So he wasn't speaking out of intelligence or confidentiality.
Not revealing any secrets.
He wasn't revealing any secrets.
All out there on the internet.
So it's all out there on the internet, which is a direct challenge against Secretary of State John Kerry and what he is saying. And then the president, after the speech, he says, "I didn't see the speech, but my aides informed me what it said, and I read bits and pieces of it." And the president says, "There's nothing new." So you got John Kerry saying you're giving away secrets. You got the president saying there's nothing new in it. And you got the prime minister saying what I'm sharing with you is readily available on the internet.
Right.
And so, but it's a warning. He drew a line in the sand.
He absolutely did. And the thing is, it's disingenuous to say there's nothing new or that he had no plan or no way forward. I mean, I tweeted out, you know, an ironic tweet. I said, hey, how about having two standing armies on either side of Iran, say in Iraq or Afghanistan? I mean, that's what Bush did. Bush created a situation where, without attacking Iran directly, he established a standing army in Afghanistan and a standing army in Iraq on either border of Iran. Therefore, the trigger was cocked, okay? What did Iran do? It stopped its nuclear program. It backed down. President Bush, George W. Bush, was a leader.
Yeah, but he also said, Prime Minister said yesterday, call their bluff. If this thing comes and they walk away from the table, call their bluff.
Right, exactly. And I want to go to your initial point. When he talked about the reality of Iran, he named 3 things in terms of the need for them to change their behavior.
Right.
Okay? Don't just talk to me about what you'll do with your nukes and what you won't do. You need to change as a country because you are a bad actor. You are the fomenter of terrorism, etc. And he said, stop aggression in the Middle East.
Right.
And of course, you know, Yemen had just fallen, and Yemen is, you know, the agents of Iran are involved in that. Stop supporting terrorism around the world.
Right.
And stop threatening to annihilate Israel. I mean, is that reasonable? Listen to this. The head of Iran put out a tweet in English, of course, because it's for our benefit, 9 key questions about eliminating Israel. And he just goes to say, the only means of confronting a regime which commits crimes, he's talking about Israel, right, which commits crimes beyond one's thought and imagination is resolute and armed confrontation. They have called for the extermination of Iran and
Israel.
Of Israel.
Right.
And how dare they? I mean, how can we sit here and act like this is, oh, well, you know, you have to understand it from their point of view. Excuse me, they have threatened the existence of Israel, and we're going to even come close to allowing them to have a nuclear weapon? It's insane.
All right, so that goes back to the central question, and you've already answered it. And I asked this to people who have emailed me and thought that we were being a little too zealous on the Israeli side of things, and I'm sorry, but that's what I believe. But and that is, what is it with President Obama that he wants Iran to continue to have nuclear capacity? What is it that he is at any level allowing that to happen?
You know, one of the famous quotes of President Reagan, and of course he was a huge influence on so many people, including little old me, but I mean, he was such a huge influence in the Cold War. And he said, you know, in terms of dealing with Soviet Union, which was quite a bit more dangerous than Iran in terms of the weaponry it had, the nuclear weapons, he said, trust but verify. But that's the famous quote. Right. But people forget that he goes on to say, trust but verify, and don't be afraid to see what you see. Meaning, if evil is rising and if an enemy is preparing to attack you, don't pretend it's not happening. And what the Obama administration is doing, because I believe it's afraid to see what it sees, because it's an appeasing administration, is they're pretending that a deal, that words on a paper, you know, peace in our time, as Neville Chamberlain says, is going to have real impact. Right, and most sensible people know it's not.
Before I run out of time, I only got about 2 minutes left, Bob. Do you think it's possible that what the Prime Minister was saying yesterday is, folks, we want you to be with us, but we're ready to go at it alone? And basically what he's saying is, we're going at it alone. A nuclear Iran in our part of the world is not acceptable.
It's an existential threat for Israel. Israel, as any nation, has a responsibility to its people, survival being number one, you know, security. And the ramifications of this for Americans, we have to think soberly about. He basically said, if this continues to go forward, it's inevitable there will be war, and as you said, and Israel will do it even if it has to go alone. Okay, that's on the table. The reaction from Iran and the radical Islamists is going to be attacking America, shutting down the Straits of Hormuz if they can do it, cutting off oil. All of these things are going to affect us.
Yeah.
This is a global problem, and we as a superpower and as a global leader can't pretend that it's not our problem. We can't pretend that, because guess what? It is our problem.
Yes, it is, very much so. All right, so let's say the president goes ahead with his policy and goes ahead with this deal. Got 30 seconds. Can Congress and should Congress interfere?
I think it should do everything it can do constitutionally, and I believe the Senate has a responsibility to ratify it. And yes, I think it should be as confrontational, and I think the presidential candidates have a role to play in this, because
They better speak out now.
they better speak out soon.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
Thank
Good to
you,
see you.
Perry.
I'm
What a
glad you're back
pleasure.
in the loop.
It's a great pleasure to be on the air with you.
Move home, will you? Come back west. Don't stay out east. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.